Good morning, family. I gotta say, I feel a little bit better equipped to talk about Father's Day than I did Mother's Day. Uh, Not really sure why. I thought a lot about this holiday over the last week. And thought back to some of the Father's Days I've witnessed and been a part of, and even the two that I've had now as a father myself. And one of the things that I find uh, telling is that generally when you see a family celebrating Father's Day, who's it really about? It's usually about the kids, right? It's interesting because we don't often praise fathers. I mean, it doesn't actually happen all that much in our society or as in our families. We don't really lift them up the same way we do mothers. And understand everything I'm about to say. I am not downgrading mothers. I'm not saying they don't do as much. Don't take that to mean this. I'm just saying we tend to acknowledge mothers quite frequently and often. We're actually usually pretty good about that. At least some of us. Some of you could do better. Fathers are a different story, though. We do what we're supposed to do. We know that it's required, that it's expected out of us, and that's good enough. And so the interesting thing, at least in the years that I've witnessed this in families, is Mother's Day is all about the mother, right? You take her to her favorite restaurant. The kids make her gifts. You do all these things. It's all about the mother. What do you do on Father's Day? Well, Dad takes over supper, right? Because he's going to grill, and then you go outside and you play with the kids. You have games with the kids, and at first I was like, well, man, that's a real disservice, isn't it? And then I thought about it, and I'm like, is there a better way of telling your family what fathers are? I mean, isn't that what being a father is all about? Every decision I make, everything that I do is all for somebody else. That isn't something to resent. And maybe it's because of my unique position, but I feel very blessed to be in a place in life where I can do that. Where I can have my every decision be centered around other people. To be blessed with that many people that I love and cherish that much is the greatest blessing anyone could ever ask for. And I never realized how much support I was going to get from people I knew nothing about. I say we. When these stories, we means Eden and I, not Bailey and I. Bailey's at work in these stories. Right? But Eden and I took LaVon and Keith to our favorite restaurant, which is Hungry Charlie's Lunchbox there in Waterloo. He sells all these hot dogs. Bailey doesn't eat hot dogs. We like them. So on Thursdays when Bailey's at work, that's what me and Eden do. We go there and we eat lunch at Charlie's Lunchbox. And this guy's never charged me for hot dogs for Eden. Right? Like I pay for mine, and then he just gives hot dogs for Eden. And when she's done, and if he hears her say, I want another one, he just makes her another one. There was one day, she happened to be extremely hungry for whatever reason. She ate 4 hot dogs. This guy just kept giving them to her. And I was terrified because I hadn't quite figured it out by then, and I'm going, these hot dogs are like $4 a piece. I finally brought it up to him. I said, I really feel some kind of way about the fact that I never pay you for these. You just give us all these free hot dogs. He asked me why I'm in there all the time with Eden. And he said, are you married? You got a ring on, where's your wife? And I said, well, she doesn't like hot dogs. And on Thursdays, I explained to him on Thursdays she works and I get my day with Eden. And so we come here on Thursdays. He said, you don't worry about her hot dogs. I am honored beyond measure that my place is the place you would pick for your daddy-daughter thing. He said, I used to have that same thing with all of my kids. There was a special place for just dad to take them. And he said, I am honored beyond measure that would be me for you. And you're not going to have to pay for her hot dogs while you're coming here. You're not going to pay for her meals. And so, and that seems like such a small, free hot dogs, right? Like, free steak would have been better, right? But to have this stranger who did not really know us all that well to just show that much support, just not even for anything special I'd done, just for me being a dad, was amazing. Veterans Day, one of the other practices that Eden and I have is we go to Fairway in the morning, because Fairway has those little kiddie carts, and that Eden just thinks that's the coolest thing in the world, to be a big girl and push that little kiddie cart around while dad puts, whatever meats he's going to smoke that weekend there. And so we do that a lot. We go to Fairway on Thursdays, and so this Thursday was kind of hectic. She was being, really hyper and high energy, as toddlers sometimes are, and I am like afraid because she's not being disobedient. Like, there's nothing for me to correct, but I'm just strung out and tired, and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. And we're just checked out. I had her put her cart away, and this guy comes in. This is going to sound like I'm stereotyping, but to be fair, I'm going to blame you guys for doing the same. Tall, skinny guy wearing a Vietnam veteran's hat. The reason I say I'm stereotyping is because every single one of you guys has a picture of what this guy looks like just based on what I just told you. All right? But this guy comes in, and he looks at me, and he looks at Eden putting her car away. He says, "You're doing a great job, Dad." Did not know me, had no idea what kind of day I was having. I had no idea that I had never heard somebody say those words to me before. Was I doing a great job? He wouldn't know. Honestly, I could have been the worst dad in the world. He'd have had no idea. But something that took him half a second, looked at the situation, said some nice words, and it was huge for me. How infrequently do we get praised as fathers? Because we're doing what's expected. I think it's important. It taught me the importance of recognizing the times where I could be on the giving end of that. Where I see men struggling with family issues and how much support these guys need. Here's the thing. And the reason why little things like that become so important to dads. Father, in my view, is probably the weightiest title anyone could ever carry, ever. That's just my view of it. And I'll tell you why. Because we share it with somebody we could never measure up to. There are so many guys that have talked to me about the difficulty they have following in their dad's footsteps, their father's footsteps. And I can get that, right? Like some of you guys had some dads, they were giants in life. And I can get how hard it is to follow that, to try to live up to that. But here's the thing, it goes deeper than that. You see, we share a title with the creator of the universe. That is something, we are never going to measure up to that. Right? We share a title with not somebody who was willing to give his life for us, somebody who did. There's somebody who put his eternal relationship, this son of his, that he shared a relationship since forever, and he hung him for us. He sent him down here to suffer for us. I'd like to think that I would do the same for my daughter. I believe that I would. But we're not talking hypotheticals here. This actually happened. How am I supposed to measure up to that? Who am I to carry that title? That's pretty weighty. We look at all the job requirements of being a father, not just a father, but a husband. Right? We simplify it, right? We simplify it down to protect, provide, and preside. Right? You're the spiritual head of your household. It's your job to protect your household. It's your job to provide for your household. We like to simplify it. Those three things that sound easy enough. But how often do we actually stop to consider how much we expect? How much we give? Now, I've only got 3 people in my household. But some of you guys must be suckers for punishment because you're working up to double digits, some of you people. But you think about, just 3 people and the responsibility to make sure that no one in that house goes without ever. That's a lot, right? Because as a bachelor, I went without all the time. And I only had one mouth to feed. And then all of a sudden, overnight, it felt like I had to suddenly grow up and not only make sure that I never went without, but I had these other people that couldn't go without too. That's a huge change from being a boy to a man. Talking about preside, how many of us actually find it easy to be spiritually mature? But now, not only am I obligated to be spiritually mature for the sake of my relationship to God, suddenly I have to be able to exemplify it in the best way that I can so that 2 other people can look at it and see what I'm trying to do and follow. That's a lot. And as for protection, let me just tell you some of my views on life, okay? First of all, I think we got to do away with the kids' birthdays. All right? And we just make this a celebration for the parents. Because I kept that kid alive for another year. And that is a way bigger miracle than her being alive for another year. All right? It is protecting your family is massive when one of them just seems bent on putting themselves in the most dangerous situations imaginable. Right? Like you look out, no matter how many times you get after her, she's jumping on furniture, jumping off the furniture that's twice as tall as she is, trying to leap from one chair to another. She's 2. She can't jump and lift both feet off the floor. But she thinks she can make a 4-foot gap between a chair and a couch. I got to be on, we have to stay on a swivel, constantly looking, constantly seeing what they're doing, making sure they're not being put in any danger. More than that, I have to pay attention to everyone around her. And understand, again, I don't say that none of this is something I resent. I love this job. This is probably the only job I've ever had that seems to be natural. I'm not having to force myself to do it. I don't do these things because I have to. I want to do these things for her. That makes it a lot easier. But make no mistake, fatherhood is a big job. We spend a lot of time acknowledging mothers, and that's good. Because your jobs are big. It's tough. But I think we should also acknowledge that fatherhood is equally big. And even though it's what's expected, we should appreciate the fact that we choose to be godly fathers. How much more difficult it becomes because of that. So some of you don't have a hard time understanding the depth of what I'm talking about because some of you enjoyed a life with a father who fulfilled his obligations, who was godly. But some of you are like me trying to figure it out. You know, in premarital counseling we did, we spent a couple days of it talking about parenting techniques. And to be fair, the preacher that did our premarital counseling was pretty fast and loose on what his idea of parenting techniques was. And I expressed some concern about that, about how I wanted to be a father. I've always wanted to be a father. I wanted to be a dad since I was like 8 years old, right? Like every kid in my class, I want to be a cop. I want to be a doctor. I wanted to be a dad. Didn't care what it took to get there. I didn't care what job I had to do to make it happen. But that's all I wanted. But I talked to him about how ill-equipped I felt. I said, I don't know how I've lived for 27 years. I guess it'd be 26, 27 years at this point. I don't know how I've lived this long. How am I supposed to get a kid alive that long? He said, you know, the interesting thing is most people don't talk about this. As much as we talk about God being our loving Father in heaven, he said we don't often talk about what a perfect example he is for us who need that example of what a father looks like. You know, Bailey's like the gentle soul of our household, right? That's not hard to imagine. For a while, she struggled because I always seemed to be a lot heavier-handed with Eden than she was. Quick to stop my sentences short with her, quick to put her in her place, quick to tell her what's expected, and sometimes quick to discipline in a physical manner if I needed to. It was something I had to have a long conversation with her about. I had to explain myself. And I said, she needs comfort. That's good. Right? And she's getting that from you. I'm not looking at her right now. I'm trying to pay attention to who she's going to be in 18 years. My responsibility as a father is to look at who she's going to be at 18 years and how am I going to get her there. Sometimes that means telling her when she's doing wrong. Sometimes that means telling her when she's doing wrong in a harsh way. And sometimes when she's not listening to me tell her that she's doing something wrong, I got to show her that it's wrong. There are a lot of people that are against this. I think the Bible makes it pretty well clear that that's the example we're given. There are consequences for wrong actions. And God hands those punishments and consequences out as he needs to in order to correct our course. Psalms 127:3. I love this verse for Father's Day. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. I'm not sure what I'm being rewarded with, or for, I should say. I don't know what I'm being rewarded for. But I have no doubt in my mind that I did something that I'm getting rewarded for. And I tell people how spoiled I am as a Christian. I'm also spoiled as a father because there are people that tell me, like dads who talk to me, and they're like, oh, yeah, she's this age. You can expect this, this, and this. I'm like, sucks for you. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, my daughter doesn't do any of those things. My daughter's great. Like, we watch Transformers once a week. Like, that's how cool my daughter is. I think every man is on some level concerned with what we're leaving behind, with our legacy. I talk quite frequently with Bailey about my concern for what kind of name I'm giving them. See, I bear a name I haven't really had a lot of reason to be proud of throughout my life, either because of the people that came before me carrying that name or because of what I did with it. But I am primarily concerned with making it a name my kids will want to carry. God blessed me with a heritage to follow after me, a purpose in life to keep me on the straight and narrow. Proverbs 3:11, this goes with what I was just saying about God's example for correction. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in. See, I don't correct you because I dislike you. I correct you because I love you. I correct you because I am primarily concerned with who you are. See, if I didn't love you, I could care less what you did, as long as it doesn't affect me. But indifference is not an option for the Christian. Do you understand that? We are not allowed to be indifferent on anything. It's not something that's permitted to us. This isn't just Christian men. This is all Christians. At no point does God permit us to be indifferent on anything. It is either good or it is evil. It is either something we should indulge in or something we should stay away from. There's always a reason for one side or the other. And those areas might fluctuate based on circumstances, right? We do certain things around certain people. We can't do those things around certain other people, things like that. But there's always right and wrong. And we are always supposed to love what is right and hate what is wrong. We don't get to go through life being indifferent to the suffering of people we don't know. We are called to be the brother, the good neighbor, the good Samaritan. And most importantly, we're not permitted to be indifferent to the eternal destination of the souls around us. God's greatest design in all of creation was his salvation plan for us. The extent and the planning and the work that he went through to provide us an opportunity for redemption. Shows us that the primary concern of God is our well-being on a spiritual level. That means that as a father, it is my responsibility to be primarily concerned with the spiritual well-being of my daughter. That I must pursue her spiritual maturity and teaching as harshly and as strongly and as lovingly as God did my own. That is quite possibly the biggest task of them all. To be concerned with her eternity all the time, whether something is pursuing her towards the correct end, the righteous path, or the wicked one. We make so many mistakes, I think. We see a child in their innocence and we say, we can overlook these things that they're doing or the things that are happening around because, she's 2. These things are going to happen. She's 2. But when do I start? When she's 3? When she's 4? When she's 15? When am I supposed to start? Psalms 103, 17 through 18. I know I'm reading a lot of Psalms and Proverbs today, aren't I? But from everlasting to everlasting, the Lord's love is with those who fear him, and his righteousness with their children's children, with those who keep this covenant and remember to obey his precepts. Proverbs 20, verse 7, I think, is probably the verse that carries the most weight for me as a father. The righteous lead blameless lives. Blessed are their children after them. So you see, I can't just be concerned with my daughter and her actions. God tells me that she's going to be blessed or burdened by my own. I like to think that I'm doing an okay job most days. And then other days, I remember that I'm supposed to be the most spiritually mature person in my house. And I don't feel much like I'm doing such a great job. They can be tough. Especially when there is another extreme to all of this. Colossians chapter 3, verse 21. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. And we can do that. Dads, some of you granddads can attest that you have made that mistake. Sometimes we can push them so strongly towards the path that we want that we make them feel like they can never get there and they become discouraged and stop trying. It's hard to find that balance. So, primarily, I want to encourage fathers, if you're somebody with children or a grandparent, because in all honesty, God never really separated those two out a whole lot. I mean, we do as a society, but in all reality, a grandfather is still a father. The difference is you actually get to see how your parenting affects the next generation, which can be a blessing or a burden. So you see, just because your child has a kid doesn't mean you stop being your child's parent. You're still supposed to be the spiritual head. You're still supposed to be the one protecting them, sometimes providing for them. Interestingly enough, the whole 18, you're an adult, my obligations are done is a very Americanized, modern way of thinking. You won't see it in the Bible. A man's job is to protect and provide for his children. It never tells us until they grow up. That can be really tough. And as the story of the prodigal son will tell us, there is a time where they choose to leave us. We have to allow them to do that. That is, in fact, their choice. But should they return, we're still their father. You see, you granddads, you get to see whether or not you've succeeded thus far. Because it'll show in their parenting. It'll show in your grandkids. So I want to encourage any of you men that are in a relationship of this type that the task is big. It is eternally vast. But God does not give tasks to people and not provide them a way of doing it. As we have talked about here in church before, right? You are made sufficient for all good works. Is there a better work than being a father? After 2.5 years, I can't say that I could think of one. But that means that I have to believe that God tells me that I have been made sufficient as a father. Mothers, grandmothers, show a little bit of patience, right? Because we're not just worried about how they feel right now. We're not worried about whether they're coping with things right now. Your husbands, your sons, even your fathers are carrying the weight of a title that is only held by the Creator of the universe. That is a big task. That is a big job. They know they make mistakes. All right, I'm going to tell you the things that guys probably want to say and often don't. We are infinitely aware of our mistakes. Right? I promise you, there is no point I've messed up with Eden that I have not beat myself up in my room or in my basement over my mistake and acknowledged just how badly I failed at it. I promise you, you don't have to tell me. Right? I don't need my wife to tell me how to be a father. I need my wife to acknowledge that my job is very different from hers. And that I am but a man. And I am trying to do the job that is only exemplified by somebody I can never reach. It's a little bit of grace, a little bit of patience, And above all, love one another. This covers all of it, does it not? That is how we prevent ourselves from discouraging our children. Even when we have to be harsh with them, we are loving towards them. There are times my daughter gets spanked when she's out of line. She does not go to her mother for comfort. She comes back to me. There are times when she's mad at me. I don't ask my wife to step in because I just don't want to deal with it. It's my job to help her, to learn to manage those things. You see, yes, she'll get discipline from me, but I am primarily concerned with doing it in the most loving way I can. Love your spouses. Acknowledge that they're usually doing the best they know how to do. Whether they fail, whether they succeed, I promise you the knowledge that I'll have to answer to God for it is infinitely worse on my head than having to answer to anyone else. Men, the fact is your wife looks at things very differently than you do. You see, I want my daughter to learn how to handle disappointment. My wife wants her to not be disappointed. It's my job to love her through that too. To appreciate her for what she's concerned with, for the part that she plays. And for some of you, and this might be the hardest thing I say to you all morning, love your parents. Vast majority of them are in a situation much of us have now experienced. Struggling through it, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to figure out what's changed from yesterday, trying to figure out how this little person who isn't communicating properly is thinking about the world, trying to figure out what's wrong with somebody who won't tell me what's wrong, trying to figure out why she liked celery yesterday and can't stand the sight of them today. Love your parents. Most of the time, they're doing the best they can, but they are people. They are fragile, frail, flawed people living in a fallen and flawed world. There will be disappointments. There will be times we are let down by them, and sometimes we're the ones letting them down. But the love of Christ abides, and our place in heaven is assured. So even in the midst of despair and disappointment, we must let joy abide. To remember our places with each other, the responsibilities that we have with each other. Remember your fathers today. Some of you who no longer get to enjoy sharing it with them. It's good to remember the lessons that they taught you. To remember the place that they held in your life. And if nothing else, find somebody to impart their wisdom onto. Whether it be your kids, whether it be your grandkids, or whether you just find a dad who is struggling through it and giving them the advice you were given. You see, we men struggle and fight for every scrap of wisdom we can find in life, usually because we're too hard-headed to hear it when somebody just says it to us. So if you have it, don't let it die. Stick together. Love your brothers. Love God. This morning, we'd like to invite you. We'd like to invite you for comfort, for prayers, for encouragement. We'd like to invite you to enter into a covenant with the Creator Himself, the one perfect Father, who loved you so much that He sent His Son to die on a cross for you. He would pay the highest price possible for the chance that you would accept it. So whether it be prayers, whether it be confession, or whether it be baptism, whatever your needs are this morning, we ask that you come and make them known so that we can help you see them met as we stand and sing.